So my name is Meredith Arnot, and I am HR, even though I hate telling people that I'm HR. And I work with two companies. So I work with a company called Perceptive Edge. I've been doing that for about 4.5 years, and we work with small companies or entrepreneurial companies or growing companies that don't want or necessarily need a full-time HR person, but they need advice from time to time, or they need help with projects when it's beyond their understanding or their scope. So I work with a lot of tech startups in that business. I also work with accessibility, which we are a partner at Profiles International, which is psychometric assessment tools that are used to bring some data and science to making otherwise just kind of gut or intuitive people decisions in business. So this is tailored more to people that are leaders, or maybe you're a startup owner, or maybe you're just developing some really cool project by yourself, and it's going to explode because it's really cool, and then you're going to need to grow. So food for thought for the future. And if you are an employee, not a leader, this stuff still applies to you in terms of seeing it in your company. So HR is kind of something that tends to go on the back burner for other things that are more important until something goes wrong. And I help companies avoid having things go wrong by setting it up in a way that you avoid that. So instead of avoiding HR altogether, because you don't want to be too HR-ish, you just need to think of it in a bit of a different way. So true or false, the best way to predict whether a candidate will be successful as an executive assistant is that when they arrive to the interview, their handbag will match their shoes.
True.
That was actually true, statistically true, in one company, and so the staffing manager actually used this as their strategy when they were hiring executive assistants. So I just want to show you, you can be creative and have fun, even though it's HR. I'm not used to the computer here. So, where are we? True or false? It is 10,000 plus times more of a risk to make a hiring mistake in Canada than to die while skydiving.
True.
That's actually true as well. So it's chances of dying while skydiving is 0.00095545, repeat ad nauseum. Chances of injury while base jumping is 0.4%. Chances of dying while cave diving is 10.957%. And chances of making the wrong hiring decision is about 6.5 to 21.3%, and that's based on annual turnover in Canada. So how many people here have taken a job that they didn't end up liking, or it wasn't what they thought it would be in the interview? Yeah.
Sorry, where does death for the HR person fit in there?
It's coming. It's coming. What about how many people just took a job and then they didn't end up really liking the people or the environment? How many people took a job and they hated it and quit because their boss was a dick? Okay. So it doesn't matter if you're a leader or an employee, this stuff does apply to you. And all the things that we're going to talk about have to do with having a good leader, and they're the reason that you end up having a good culture. So I kind of struggle to find alternative verbiage or what else to call myself in HR. And as I said, I don't really like to tell people I do HR. So I offer the antithesis of what you would think of HR for companies that still lead HR, but don't want to deal with the BS too much. So usually HR is seen as qualitative. Usually they're not seen as having a direct impact on the revenues. So like salespeople, you can measure that. Accounting, you can measure that. But I argue that people directly impact your revenues. They're the ones that make it happen or not. And so I ask companies two questions. One, what are your business objectives? And two, who's going to make that happen for you? And so I help companies with the who and understand that that's actually really important. So it's often done by the owner in most smaller companies, usually until a costly mistake is made. So you can do it on your own, and you might roll along for 10 years and nothing bad happens, but it's not necessarily optimal. And what about all the stuff that you don't know? So I view HR as a specialty, just like bookkeeping. And your people are your most valuable asset. So they can move your company ahead, which is what I help companies do. They can hold your company back, which is usually when I get called to come in and start working with companies. Or they even have the power to shut you down, which I've helped a number of companies barely scrape through avoiding as well. So most people think HR is dry, it's all about legalities and structure and no. So I want to look at what are the rules that you have to follow from a legal perspective. Are you following the rules? Do you even know what the rules are? And are you following too many rules? So rules often are just there for the sake of being there, or we've always done them that way. These are the things that actually hold you back from growing. They annoy your team, they waste time, and sometimes they're just not logical. So we can get rid of the dumb rules and move forward. And HR can be fun. I love my job because it's people and they're unpredictable. I hate my job because it's people and they're unpredictable. It moves companies forward. So my challenge out of this, sorry, I don't know this computer. Out of this presentation really is just be as strategic about your people and creating your culture just as much as you are about creating and developing your product and also developing your brand. So in a poll conducted by Monster, while 88% of employees place really high value on employee incentives and programs, only 20% of Canadians feel that they're provided with those in their current company. 82% of people said that their company did, quote, nothing at all to keep them on board. So it sounds to me as though people have a lot of incentive to be going elsewhere. As a leader, are you so busy that you're just in your day-to-day, going through the motions, responsibilities, that you're reactive when there's a people issue, but you're not really being proactive and you're not really being strategic to create an actual culture? So the Google culture wasn't created by accident, and it's not enough to just give someone a computer and sit them in a corner and say, program. And every company does have a culture, whether there's 2 people or not, they just maybe haven't defined it. I work with, my smallest client is 1.5 people, and my biggest one is about 450. And they both have cultures. Some is more defined than others, but so if you're going to create a culture, why not create one that inspires people, it enables people to be more creative, it enables them to develop a better product for you, and you can actually even have some fun at work. So what makes your company a desirable place to work? And do you think your employees are just kind of satisfied with showing up, or are they actually bragging about working for you? Or if you're an employee, are you just going to work every day, or are you actually telling people, yeah, I love my job, this company's fucking cool? So employees don't quit their companies, they quit their boss. It's really true though, I've seen it happen, and especially among younger generations, the top reason people leave their company is their boss, other than money. Those would be the 2. I came up with a survey where they asked, was the attitude of your direct supervisor or manager the primary factor in quitting a previous job? 35% of the respondents said yes. I would say it's a lot higher than that, and in the hundreds of thousands of interviews I've done over the years, the boss is always the top reason. And of all the other reasons that people have given me, and a lot of those are bizarre, it all ties back to the boss, because the boss can change those things. The boss can even change salary or money or things other than location, I'd say. Thanks. So, at your company, people see you, or you see your manager as the big bad boss, or people see you, or you see your manager as their best friend, or people see you, or you see your manager as their team member that they work with rather than their boss that they work for. I interview a lot of people and they all say, oh, my goal in 5 years is to be in management. But people don't really know what that means, and there's a big difference between being a leader and being a manager. to illustrate that, I like to talk about promotion. And a lot of companies will promote from within, which is not a bad thing. But where it goes wrong is that usually they promote people that have either A, been there the longest, or B, might be the top performer in their area. So just because you know a lot about the company or the product or the service doesn't mean you're a good leader. Just because you might be the best developer on your team doesn't mean you're a good leader or even want to be a leader. So I guess as a leader or an entrepreneur or a business owner, you have assumed their leadership responsibilities. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of leader are you? And how do your employees see you and your leadership? Or if you're an employee, you could ask yourself, what kind of leader is your boss? And do you think that's different than the way that they think of themselves? So, is this statement true or is it a myth at your company? So the HR department or leadership team always sets the example of good corporate behavior by practicing what it preaches. So a group called the 2% Factor explored views of HR leadership and how leaders define themselves and how employees define themselves. So according to the survey, this is how HR leadership define themselves. I'm going to extend this as well to my experience and looking at leaders and the issues that I've observed with companies. Often I do start working with companies when there is a big issue or something's going wrong. So one of the things I might do, or also because they've grown a lot, say in the last few years, so it's good to stop and be strategic and come up with a new plan. So I will often come in and talk to people at all levels and get a gauge of where things are at. So are people happy there? What do they think of their boss? Maybe people are looking to leave, or maybe people just have really good ideas that would make the product or the company or the space a better place to work. And all of those would equal a better product, happier customers, more customers, which means happier investors if you have those, and more money. But sadly, often when I come into companies, probably more often than not, that's a myth. So more specifically, we'll whip through these. This is how HR or leadership has defined what they think their role is and where they think their value is as a resource of the team. So be the example of tolerant and respectful behavior that the rest of the company should model. Resolve conflicts between employees, including management. Support employees by providing high quality training and development opportunities. Provide the management team or themselves with tools and strategies to engage their team. Develop and institute policies that make the workplace safer for employees. Build a strong workplace culture that fosters creativity and innovation, interest and engagement, and respect and communication among all levels of employees in the company. And work closely with the team as a strategic partner. So employees' take on this was quite different. Sarcasm, disbelief, and in some instances actual anger were the initial reactions witnessed when employees saw how their leaders had viewed themselves. And I've found this a lot in companies as well. And this is why I hate defining myself as HR or telling people that I even do HR. So there's often a huge disconnect, is the point of this, between how leaders view themselves and their team views themselves. And the problem is that most people who work in HR aren't quite big picture enough to step back and look at how do the people and how does HR fit into the business. The problem for leaders who aren't HR is that their owners are doing it themselves and they're so busy running the business, they might be doing sales, they're doing development, and they're just in the day-to-day work that they've never been a leader, and HR goes on the back burner, so they're not doing it at all, or they're just doing it really ineffectively. So here's a bit more specific on what the employees think. This is the kind of too HR-ish part that you want to avoid, and you definitely don't want this happening in your company. So I won't go to leadership if I have an issue with my boss or coworker because I don't feel like anything would change anyway. No one holds leadership accountable for actually supporting the company's HR or people. The engagement strategies may sound good in a textbook but are ridiculous for real life employees. Or training seems to be based on what leadership wants and does not reflect the needs of most employees. Training doesn't happen at all. Leadership is great at building this ideal picture of how we're supposed to be and great at telling us how easy it is to get to the ideal, but they're terrible at or disappear from working with us to put in their own time and actually do it with the people. HR is one of the most dysfunctional departments in the company. I avoid them whenever possible. So the takeaways from this are pretty apparent. The value that a company's leader or HR can bring would be tremendous. However, it's not really translating over, or it's not being adequately demonstrated through actual tangible behaviors and practices and ideas, and it's not being communicated to the rest of the team. So leaders really need to look and see, is there a disconnect between the way that you see yourselves and the way that your team sees you? And if that is the case, why is that, and what are those differences? Also, there's a significant need, I think, for leadership to take a more hands-on approach to supporting the effort, so they can't just say, okay guys, you need to do this, this, and this, and then they go back to their day-to-day and what's more important on their plate and leave people to figure out what, okay guys, do this, this, and this really means. So, culture. I will leave you with some questions. So what is your company culture? What is the leadership style there? And have these even been defined? Could you describe them in 10 words off the top of your head? Often I work with companies where I come in on a hiring project and I say, okay, well, we need to attract people, so what are the great things about working here? And I get the blank face, and nobody can actually tell me why it's a good place to work, even though they've been there for maybe 10 years. So could your team members actually describe your culture? And do you think that the responses would be the same? So not defining a culture or not being strategic about it might mean that you're avoiding being too HR-ish in the traditional sense, but it doesn't really mean you're creating a great place or culture to work in. And you don't need to have all the rules and structure of a big corporate environment. You just need to do what works for you in bringing people together. And there are so many free or cost-effective things that you can do to show your people that you do see that they're the reason for your success. You do appreciate them. You do accommodate them. I think a lot of companies have, for years, treated everybody the same, and everything has to be fair and the same. And I think that every person is different. That's the point of having a group of people come together. So everyone's going to have different motivations, everyone's going to have different ideas. That's going to help you build a better product again. And HR and culture can be viewed as qualitative, but they can also be key in making sure that you do provide a great place to work, where really good people want to work, really good people want to stay, and they are more creative, and you keep them, and happier people are more productive. And the only other point I wanted to make was you got to follow through. So if you bother to define your culture and put things in place to make that happen, then if you don't follow through, then everything else you do or say people are just going to say is a lot of BS. So. And finally, that is me. So I would go into more all kinds of cool, fun things you can do to make a good culture, but I didn't have time, so I just wanted to scare you with the fact that a lot of companies don't have good cultures.
Any questions?
Unless you have questions. Yeah.
Classroom, as we know it, right? So like primary, like high school, has changed a lot. And we know for a fact that teachers have teachers, long-standing teachers have had some challenges working with the makeup in the classroom. That makeup is going to translate to workplace. What are you doing, or what should an HR person do to make these new accommodations that often enough they're not trained in?
That's a big question with several prongs to answer, but I do agree with you. I've always thought that the school system only caters to a very small type of brain or personality, and we're seeing that that just doesn't work and people are going outside of that. I do a lot of work trying to help companies incorporate Gen Y into the workforce because they have such different motivations, different work style, different work ethic, very different. So for me is exactly that, is being aware of what are their motivations, how are they different, what do they want out of this job, how do you make it a career where they actually want to stay, because loyalty seems to be a common theme where they just jump ship and find something else. So I try to work at strategies for working with the people in a company that aren't from that generation to better understand that and come up with ways where they still feel like they are coming in. One big thing is they do like to feel like they contribute and they're doing something bigger. They also like to grow and learn. So I work with companies to enable people to do that as well, rather than just keeping someone on the same old role all the time. Did that answer your question, or?
I was actually, I was thinking more like culture, because that's essentially a big part of it as well.
Okay, thank you so much.